Welcome to day 3 of this 30-day weight loss challenge. By now you should have a clear idea of the weight you want to be, and more importantly the reasons why you want to be that particular weight. Now in today's session I'm going to be sharing with you some techniques and some tips, things that have worked well for my clients over the years. Over the years I've seen many clients and helped many clients to lose weight, and over the years I've given clients of mine techniques to try out throughout that week, and many of these techniques have been successful. Some things that I've asked clients to do haven't worked that well. So what I've done is I've condensed all the things that have worked well for my clients over the years and put them into a bit of a plan for you to follow. Now with regard to this plan, it's not a case of you've got to do every single thing on the plan. If something doesn't work for you, something doesn't fit into your lifestyle, then don't do it. Think of this plan as almost like a mechanic. A mechanic has a toolbox full of tools, but that mechanic probably doesn't use every single tool in that toolbox. So have that same kind of mentality with this plan. Now you can get a copy of this plan by visiting my weight loss blog, which is theinsideoutapproach.com/blog. And as I say, you can then print out a copy of this plan. So the first thing on this plan then is it can be useful to get into the habit then of having 3 meals per day. So that means having your breakfast, having your lunch, and then having your dinner in the evening. And by having these 3 meals throughout the day, what that can do is it can stop that snacking. For many people what might happen is they might miss breakfast. So because they've missed breakfast, it gets to about 11 o'clock and maybe lunch isn't until 1 o'clock. So that person then might have something to eat to see themselves through until lunchtime, and the chances are what they do get to eat is something snacky. But if you can get into the habit then of having 3 meals per day, what that generally means is then when you've had your breakfast, you'll feel satisfied then until lunchtime. And then likewise, once you've had your lunch, you'll feel satisfied until you have your evening meal. So again, it can be really useful to get into the habit then of having 3 meals per day. And sometimes a lot of people can also fall into that trap of when they feel hungry, they have to have something to eat straight away. But sometimes feeling hungry means that when you have one of your regular meals, you'll just enjoy it even more. So if you've had your breakfast and you feel hungry then before lunch, then that means that when you have your lunch, you'll enjoy what you're having even more. So the next point then on the plan is you don't have to diet with this 30-day weight loss challenge. Ultimately what I want you to do is I want you to find what works for you. One person might follow one particular diet. Someone else follows that same diet and it does nothing for that person because everyone's totally different. Now as we move along on this 30-day weight loss challenge, especially more so in the next lesson, I'll be teaching you a technique so you can, in a sense, break free from dieting. You can find out what works for you. Now for many people that I've worked with over the years, yes, some people will not diet. Some people will ultimately find out what works for them. For some people though, they may want to follow some kind of diet. So I always say if you are going to diet, then make it something sensible as opposed to some of the silly diets that are out there, so maybe the starvation diet, because some of those silly diets really come back to bite you. An example of that is, let's imagine a person is on a starvation diet. What will generally happen is when there's an opportunity to stock up, that person will stock up. So as I said, ultimately it's good not to diet, but if you're going to diet, then make it something sensible. Another really good exercise for you to do is when you're having one of your meals, especially more so if you're at home, but if possible also it can be achieved also at work. If you're going to have your main meal at home, then if you've got a dining room table, then use the table to have your meal. Many people might have the main meal in front of the telly. And because they're having the meal in front of the telly, they're not really consciously aware of what they're actually eating. In a sense, they're eating unconsciously. So if you've got a dining room table, then use your actual dining room table to have your meal. Turn off the telly. So what that means is you can then focus on the food that you're actually having. This, in a sense, this plan is all about you enjoying food. Food should be enjoyable. So if you're going to have a meal, actually sit down and actually enjoy that meal that you're actually having. And by having your meal then at the dining room table, turning off the telly means that you can then focus on the food that you're actually eating. So in a sense, use all your senses. Really taste the food, smell the food. What textures does each and different food have? By really enjoying and appreciating food, you can then slow things down. You can then really appreciate food more and more. And what you'll then find is that you'll really want the good, nutritious foods. So again, it can be really useful just to get into the habit and have just picking one place where you're going to have your actual meals. And as I said, then taking your time using your actual senses to actually enjoy the meal that you're having. Think of it as like when you have one of your meals, think of it as like you've gone to some really posh restaurant and you're paying a lot of money for that actual meal. Now if you have gone to some posh restaurant and you're paying a lot of money for a meal, then the chances are you'll enjoy that meal, you'll take your time, you'll savour every single bite. So have that same approach then with your meals that you have. So as I said, that one of the points there is turning off the TV, focus on what you're actually eating. The 6th point then on the plan says that once you're actually having something to eat, then don't have any fluids, just have the food. Now the reason for that is because you want to get into the habit then of when you feel full, that's the time then to stop eating. What might happen though is if you're having one of your meals but taking fluids, taking water, you might feel full and stop eating. But that feeling of fullness wasn't a true feeling of fullness. Maybe you felt full because of the fluids that you was actually taking in as well. And then what will probably happen then is an hour later, you feel hungry again because that feeling of fullness that you had wasn't a true feeling of fullness. Where if you're just having your actual meal and you feel full, then you know it's because you've had enough food. Also another thing that can really work well is obviously then once you've had your meal, then obviously you can then have something else then to drink afterwards. So as I said, the 7th point on the plan is to stop eating when you feel full. There's no rewards for a clean plate. Now some people, and again this might be from programming as that person's grown up, many people have been programmed and it's been put onto them that they have to finish everything on the plate. So if that is a deal for you, then put less on your plate. And even another good technique that has worked, I remember a particular client that it worked really well for that I was working with, he bought a smaller plate because he just couldn't get over that of leaving something on his plate. So one of the things he did was he bought a smaller plate. He could then still finish everything on his plate, didn't have to feel guilty because he just couldn't leave things and he didn't like the guilt of leaving food. So as I say, he bought a smaller plate. And ultimately, yeah, he still finished everything on his plate, but he was having less food. So things like that can really work well. Also, another thing that can really work well is to make sure that you're just taking in plenty of fluids throughout the day. For many people, sometimes they can actually mistake they can mistake thirst for hunger. But if you're taking in plenty of fluids throughout the day, then you're not going to fall into that trap. Also, sometimes what can happen is if you do feel dehydrated, then you might feel sluggish, you might feel lousy, and you might then want to pick yourself up with something snacky, something sweet, chocolate. But if you're keeping yourself hydrated, then you're not going to fall into this trap. Now, one more point that really isn't on the plan, but it's a really good idea for you to do. Going back to the idea of just picking one place where you're going to have your main meals. Now, this can really work well for snacking. Many people snack because it's convenient. So you're watching something on TV, and you then might go in the kitchen, get some biscuits, some crisps, come back and carry on watching that programme on TV and have your snack as you do so. because snacking has that convenience element to it. Now you can turn snacking into an inconvenience and the chances are you'll have less of it. So a good idea for that then is to, if for some reason you're at home and you're watching something on TV and you fancy something, you fancy that snack, then turn off the TV, get your snack, and then go to your dining room table. Sit down with your snack, and then again use all your senses to actually have that snack. In a sense, turn the snacking into an inconvenience. Because if you can turn snacking into an inconvenience, then you're probably not going to do it. If you're watching something good on telly and you feel like something, but then you have to turn off the telly, you have to go to the dining room table, you then might just think to yourself, you know what, I can't be bothered. By turning the snacking into an inconvenience, the chances are, as I said, you'll probably not even bother having the snack, but it kind of like breaks that mentality. For many people, if they say to themselves, I can't have chocolate, then that makes them want chocolate even more. With this idea, what you're actually doing is not like you're saying you can't have the snack. You can have the snack. But in order to have the snack, you've got to make it an inconvenience. So as I said, just run through these points on this plan. Find out those things that work really well for you. And as I said, if something doesn't really work well for you, then discard that. As I said, think about the mechanic with his tools and his toolbox. Doesn't use every single tool. Take that same approach with this plan. So that's the end of this lesson. And as I said, one of the points from this lesson, and number 2, was obviously I don't want you to diet. I want you to find what works for you. So in our next lesson, one of the things I'm actually going to teach you then is how you can find out what works for you so then you can break free from dieting.